Okay. Hello, hello. I'm going to wait for people to be able to join in. Welcome, everybody. I see a few people in now. Welcome, welcome. Hi. We are so excited that you're here and for today's conversation, which is all about how we can make summer feel a little more joyful and a lot less overwhelming. So I'm gonna just wait for a few more minutes so people can tune in. I guess before we dive in, quick show of hands in the chat. How many times have you heard "I'm bored this weekend"? Personally, I just bought a giant inflatable water slide because apparently that's the level of panic that I've reached heading into summer break. So if you're already wondering, how you're supposed to entertain your kids for the next 10 weeks while also working and feeding them and managing the house and making magical core memories, welcome. You are in the right place. While you're dropping your answers in the chat, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. So, we are giving away a Hearth Display and a copy of Dr. Kim's book today. Our amazing CX lead at Hearth, Bianca, is hanging out in the chat and will be choosing the winners. So, please make sure you're engaging in the chat. And if you have any questions as we go, please feel free to drop them in there or in the Q&A section. We'll save some time at the end, hopefully, for some live Q&A time and answer as many as we can. I'm gonna just take a quick peek at these comments in the chat. More than once a day. Yep, that sounds about right. Love using the water slide. Great. I'm glad I made the right decision. Okay, cool. I'm gonna get started then. Hi, everyone. I'm Kayla. I'm here at Hearth. I oversee brand marketing. I'm a mom of a 9-year-old girl who's already way cooler than me and an almost 2-year-old. So I'm totally navigating all of the same summer challenges as many of you are. And today I'm joined by two people who I couldn't think of better to have this conversation with. First, Dr. Kim, licensed marriage and family therapist, registered child play therapist, author of Parenting Through Play, my new favorite book. Dr. Kim helps parents understand how connection and play can become really powerful tools for navigating everything from behavior challenges to emotional regulation. So thank you so much, Dr. Kim. Please let me know if I missed anything there. But so happy that you're here and helping us with this conversation today. And then also joining us from the Hearth team is our very own Nat, our co-founder and the person behind much of the product vision that families use every day. She's also a mom to the cutest 1-year-old baby girl. So thank you, Nat. Um, Actually, let's do one more chat cue before we start. Everyone drop
I
one
love it.
word in the chat that describes how you're feeling heading into summer break. Um, Dr. Kim, as that kind of rolls in, I would love to hear from you and start with you. What is it that something the biggest like misconception that parents have about summer break? Let's like dive right into it.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that parents need to entertain their children and engage their children all day long. I in my book I talk about, dispelling the myth that, to play with your kids means you have to actively sit on the floor and have active dialogue with them, whether you're playing with dolls or cars or whatever your kids are into. And that's not necessarily the case, so I'm letting parents off the hook and sharing all my secrets in the book on how to do that, just in the language you use and the micro moments throughout the day and things like that. But I think that's the biggest misconception, and that, independent play is really vital for their development and things like that. So I know we're going to go into more of that later, but we don't have to keep them entertained and engaged all day long. Routines and structures are important. We're going to get to that also. But at the same time, having independent play and having things that they learn on their own increases their confidence and their competence. And so the more you can give them of that, it's actually the better.
Completely agree. And I'm looking at the chat right now. We're seeing everything from excited to overwhelmed to, counting down the days until school starts again. Why is it that something we look forward to all year can also feel so stressful the moment it arrives?
Yeah, I think it's just because we put so much pressure on ourselves to have these, quote unquote perfect summers with our kids. And, meaning that we have to schedule all the things. We have to have the perfect 4th of July with the barbecue and the fireworks and, whatever it is, with the matching outfits and, all the pressures that are put on us, especially now with the social media and living this Pinterest style life. And, it looks good from the outside, but it's not always feasible. And even though you have those moments where you feel like, oh, I did everything I'm supposed to as a mom, everything we're taught on social media to be like the perfect mom for our kids, and a lot of times those things are so stressful and there's so much pressure like on us to do that we don't enjoy the moment. We're too engaged with, creating content for it or taking the pictures or taking the videos or organizing it all and, going to the grocery store. And, our mental loads are already so heavily focused on all those things that we put more pressure on ourselves and then we can't even enjoy it. So even though it might have been like the perfect day, we're not enjoying it. So I think less is more, and not comparing ourselves or competing with anybody online with keeping up with the Joneses with the person next door or the followers that we're following or people that are following us and our friends. Like, just again, less is more. And kids are just as happy and sometimes even happier just having some sprinklers on in the backyard and some pizza and calling it a day. So again, just try to just do less and you'll actually get more benefits out of it because you'll be more present and you'll have a lot more fun.
I love that. And I definitely learned that lesson a few years ago too. Like we were a sprinkler house for a long time before I decided to get the inflatable water slide. My daughter's 9, my son's 2, as I mentioned before, huge age gap. And I feel like once I had my second, it was a lot easier to let go of
Yeah.
that pressure and not have everything feel so Pinterest worthy. People come to my home now and I'm like, this is a very lived in house, but I'm not going to apologize for it anymore. You know?
I also
Exactly.
keep seeing the resurgence of the like 90s summer,
Mm-hmm.
which I love that trend, where like I would leave at like 8 in the morning and then my parents wouldn't see me until dinner time at 7 p.m.
Yep. Yep. And I think more parents, I just wrote an article about this in LA Parent Magazine. And, I think more parents are going back to that, like going back to the basics, going back to the more the simplicity of, the way we were raised. And I think, saying less to screen time and saying more to play and just more to those simple, basic moments. Because again, it's not even so much in what you do, it's the feeling that you give to your children. So they're not going to remember, every single moment of every single summer. They're going to remember the feeling they had. Oh, summer was a fun time because we got to play, we got to maybe travel or, do things. They're not going to remember exactly even what hotel you stayed at or what meal they had. I mean, those are things we'll remember as parents, but as kids, it's not really about the details and how much you're doing for them. It's about the feeling they get of feeling seen, heard, loved, and the memories they're getting as an overall picture, not in the itty bitty details of it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nat, I want to pass it over to you if that's okay. You have spent years talking to families and building Hearth around how family life actually works. What do you think are like the biggest shifts you see happen inside families when, summer break starts?
Yeah. So I would say the biggest go from routines are flipping from being externally driven. So you may have a homeschooling system. You go to, your day, you're in school all day long. And then suddenly in summer, it's like parent run, parent decided, like overnight. So, parents now have to own like, okay, what are my kids going to do all day? What are they going to eat? What are they doing? Yes, maybe you have like a bit of a break for like a summer camp. But there's absolutely like then a tension of like, okay, how do I keep my kids occupied, but then also let them rest? Like I want things to feel meaningful. And I think Dr. Kim, you said the same. It's like you want to create these like beautiful memories that's like, sure, it doesn't have to be like they're not going to remember the exact activities, but they do want to remember like the beautiful memories, but that coordination does fall on the parents. So, you know, when you do have this like school system, you're like, okay, we have to worry about getting out the door and like what those routines are in the morning and in the evening. But during summer, you have to worry about it the whole day.
Yeah. Yeah, I struggle with that too because I want obviously to keep routines, but I also want to give them that flexibility of like enjoying summer break. So how important is predictability and routine for children during these kind of big transitions like summer break, would you say?
Yeah.
For either of you?
Happy to jump in. Yeah, I would say they're pretty important. I think kids are gonna be so excited to like step into summer and like it might be fun at first to like experience a bit of the chaos that like all rules are out the door. But I think eventually, you mentioned that how often are you hearing bored?
Mhm.
And I think I keep seeing how these like little rituals are really valuable to everyday life. Like if your kids are used to a routine, like we have a lot of our Hearth families that, really rely on their morning routines to like get dressed, brush your teeth like that already is a system that works for them.
Yeah.
And even in something more unpredictable, where it's like, oh, did you decide what you wanted for breakfast this morning? Did you, today might be your day that you get to pick what you wear, but it's like, you don't have to, wear your uniform to school. So like pick something crazy. Like there are still ways to just make it very playful while still keeping those rhythms in place that honestly kids do need.
I
Yeah,
love
and
that.
I just want to add, I talk in my book, I talk about, it's all research backed, evidence-based modalities that I use, when it even comes to play therapy, solution focused therapy, positive behavior interventions and supports. I kind of combine all of them as the trifecta of really to get, all the things, the less power struggles, less tantrums, less defiance, less disrespect, and, better compliance, better cooperation, better behavior, things like that. And what research has shown that the more unpredictable and the more ambiguity a child has in their lives, so the less structure, the less limits, the less boundaries, then more misbehavior is going to occur.
Mm,
I have a chapter in my book called the ABCs of Behavior, where parents, really dive into being curious and kind of being the detective of why their children are misbehaving, which I know we're going to talk a little bit later too in more detail, but I just want to bring it up here because a lot of times, if a child is understimulated, then that's, when the boredom becomes more of like neglect,
mm,
then that's when misbehaviors are going to come up. If there's ambiguity and uncertainty, that increases anxiety. And when anxieties increase, then of course the behaviors are going to come up, right? They're going to, do things because they're impulsive and anxious because their brains aren't developed. And so they think, oh no, like their nervous system is kind of out of whack. And so they're
mm.
thinking, their brain can't discern why, and so they're just thinking, oh, something feels wrong, I don't know what's going to happen next, especially for kids who really do rely on that structure and those routines. And so they almost have a panic attack. They have so much anxiety that the misbehavior comes from that. And so parents think, oh, they're just bored, or then they're getting in trouble because they're doing all these things. And it's like, no, the more limits and boundaries and structure and routine that you can pull back in will actually help their behavior, and they won't misbehave as much over the summer.
It's great.
Wow, there was a lot there that yeah, that was just super interesting to me. You mentioned boredom when it comes to like being understimulated. Can you explain that a little bit more? Like is
Yeah.
boredom like what is boredom actually telling us? Like is it something that we should fix and how do we know if boredom is actually just them not knowing what they can do versus when parents should step in?
Right. And that's a great question. And there is a distinction because, I think boredom's great. I talk about how, kids should be bored. I mean, that's kind of the rite of passage of being a kid. Like, be bored. That's when their biggest amounts of creativity and imagination come out typically.
Mm,
It's when they feel like they have nothing else, to do. And also like, oh, and they create this, beautiful play scenario or a beautiful game or, when my kids get bored, sometimes they turned our linen closet into a library, and they moved some
oh,
books and from their rooms and different places and they made it into a library. They wouldn't have done that if they weren't quote unquote bored, right?
Mhm.
Or they'll all of a sudden be like, mom, we made this whole story up, and they'll perform a story for me in costumes and role playing and everything, or put on a fashion show, and they'll plan all these really extravagant things. But if they weren't quote unquote bored, they probably wouldn't have come up with that. And so I think there's two things. One, there's a little front loading from parents, of just having like some ideas. And we're going to talk about, I have different ideas in the book, and I have a worksheet called the 30 Days of Play that just gives parents ideas of different things so they don't have to come up with in the moment. Because if you try and wing it, it's usually not going to happen really well, because you're thinking, I'm busy, I have laundry to do, and I have to go to the grocery store, and I have to pay bills, and we do all the things, all the responsibilities we have as a parent that need to get done. And like the last thing we want to think about is, oh, now I have to come up with ideas for my kids in the moment. And that's hard. So So having just like, some things we can put on our fridge of just quick ideas we can go to and say, okay, you're bored, great, go look on the fridge. There's lots of ideas on there, lots of
Right.
idea starters, if you will,
Hmm.
and then go from there. All you have to do is print it out. It's a free document, but or it's a chapter in my book, but um, you know, just having that a little bit, just to have some ideas on hand, maybe have some craft
Hmm.
supplies you get at the end of the year ready for summer, something like that. If they're, like I said, understimulated, it's probably because there's some sort of neglect where you've been doing so much in your day, and they're literally for the 6 hour of the day being like, I don't know what to do. I've done everything I can think of, and now I'm just going to get into mischief because I haven't really had any connection with my parent today, or I've had any connection with my sibling or whoever it is today.
Hmm.
So that's what I'm, talking about is, like I said, as sometimes someone who works from home a lot, I know that happens sometimes where I just get busy, recording a podcast, episode, and then I get into some emails, and then I have to post on social media, and like, there's all these things I have to do, and it's going on hour 3, and my kids are like, "Well, when's lunch? And when are we going to play? And when this?" And I'm like, "Oh, later, later, later," and I keep kind of putting them off, and then that's when they kind of just feel like, well, I'm kind of just lost.
Hmm.
So there's a big distinction there, but I do think some boredom and boredom in general is good, as long as they have at least some parameters, limits, routines, and you can even put them in the display, of,
Yeah.
go to the
Yeah.
display, and, there's a list of idea starters for you to do for the day. And then they can just, cross it off on like a summer bucket list, and they just cross it off of things that they can do independently while you are getting those things done.
That's super helpful. And it sounds like there are a bunch of skills that children are developing when they actually do work through that boredom themselves. I'm a big believer in the open when bored list on my Hearth display. And I'll definitely be adding some of your ideas in your book now. So thank you
Yeah,
for
and I would say play first, work later. It actually saves a lot of heartache for your kids because they feel connected, and then you're able to go get all the things done you need to get done. If you just even put in a little time at the beginning versus waiting for play as a reward, or as, okay, when I'm done working, or when you're done with this and chores and homework and all the
Oh,
things,
that's
then we can
great.
go play as a reward. Instead, play first, get that connection. Then they're going to have their cup filled, so then they're not going to keep coming to every 5 minutes. I'm bored, I'm bored, I'm bored, because they've already had that fulfillment and that connection. And
Yeah.
then you're able to get more work done after that. So put it first, and then you'll get more done.
I love that you're
Seems
saying that. Makes me
counterintuitive, but
think
it works.
that like fun starts with connection.
Yes.
It's like you can't have a lot of fun if you like don't actually feel like you are, connected at whatever like parent child level, because then you're just kind of expecting, you're like as a child, you're kind of expecting, you're like, oh, my parent is supposed to like fill these needs for me, right? Anyways, I love that.
Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah. Nat, I want to hand it over to you next. From the families that you've spoken with, what do parents often kind of misunderstand about independence and like
Hmm.
letting your kids kind of do things on their own and raising capable kids?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say kids, number one, are extremely capable and they're super hungry to help. I think we're just as humans, we're just wired that way. We're wired for independence. We're wired, like, I think I've just been so mind blown at watching, my daughter grow, where I'm just like, humans just do things and they just like, they learn to walk on their own. They learn to stand up. They learn to crawl, like they are just extremely capable. And as their little brains develop, like they just like want, like they're hungry for that permission to help. And so I think something that I'm learning right now and that I also have, heard from so many of our families is that, capability isn't about doing things like the right way or the perfect way. Like it's all about the process and the steps that actually build confidence, So like the example with my daughter learning to walk right now, that yes, we have to hold her hand a lot. I genuinely think she can walk by herself now, but that her confidence on like holding on to us while she's like she's constantly now reaching up to me to like hold her hand. And I'm like, oh, it's because you want to do this. Like you want me to reach out so you can learn to walk. And so, And even what's the other, like lately she's been doing a lot of things independently, like brushing her hair. She wants to brush her own teeth. So, we've been talking a lot about how on the hearth itself, we actually have pictures of her holding her toothbrush or holding her hairbrush. And right now, like she, is like quite young to like recognize it, but she does see herself, and she's like, oh, I am doing this. Oh, I recognize myself. And, so yes, like kids are just completely capable. And really, what you want is just continue building like that confidence through self-recognition
And they absorb so much, right? Like we
so
talk so much
quickly.
about like leading by example. And so like for me, it's like, why wouldn't we want them to learn how
Oh,
to
yeah.
do their own routines as early as possible? Like my son watches my daughter brushing her hair every morning and like putting products in now because she's at that
Mm-hmm.
age now, and like as soon as she walks out, he's like looking at all of her things and like
Oh,
using the
yeah.
brush. It might be the wrong way, but he's
Yeah, like
absolutely,
independence is messy,
yeah.
you know? Like I'm thinking about, I think this weekend we like try to make waffles and I'm like, okay, I keep, I'm like, oh, you hold an egg and try to crack it. And now at first she didn't understand, but now she like smashes it against the counter and I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yep.
but she's
Yep.
having a blast.
That's
Yeah.
funny. And it empowers them, the
Yeah,
confidence, the self-image, their self-esteem, it empowers them and they're connecting with you at the same time. So there's that
that's
connection
right.
piece. And I think someone wrote in the chat, and I wanted to mention that too, that, when you see your child misbehaving or doing something that, you don't want them to do, and, you're trying to get your things done, have them join with you. Like I talk about that in the book, like just give them a skill, give them a task to
Yeah.
do, because they'll be, like you said, more than willing to do it. And so they're
Hmm.
not only learning a life skill, but then they're also feeling important, like, oh, I have a job, like I'm going to be
That's
mom's helper
right.
or whatever it is. And so they'll want to help you do that.
Mhm.
Until they're turned 12, like my tween, and then then she thinks otherwise. She's like, I don't know if I want to do that right now. But the
And
little
then
ones
now
are
you're
like,
like, you have to.
Testing the boundaries a little bit. Yep.
Yeah, that's different. It's like now you're
great.
almost an adult. Now you know that you have to.
Yeah, but no, she's really good too, though. Actually, we gamify things now.
That's
The old, if
right.
anyone has any older children, we just gamify things.
Yeah.
Making chores into a game and fun, and getting them
Hmm.
invested. When it comes to even eating and making food, and knowing what's on the grocery list, and finding out all those things. And the other day we were, they had needed to clean their room, and so we made it into a game of who could
That's
do it
great.
quickest, and things like that. And so she'll want to do that, but you do have to adjust a little bit depending on the age and developmental level of how engaged they're going to be on whatever it is you
That's
want them to
great.
do. But when they're little, they're all for
Yeah.
it.
And it's true when they're older, it's gamification is so different. Like some kids, I mean, we've seen in so many of our Hearth families that some kids respond really well to like allowance and other kids like just love the organization,
Yeah.
that they are like, no, I just do, or even some families are like, oh no, we don't do allowance. Like, yes, maybe they get points and like we're working towards something, but it's not about allowance. It's about contributing to the family as a whole. But that gamification is like so incredibly helpful because it just feels like setting goals for themselves, like that
Mhm.
in itself is like just a huge growth opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what are the right types of rewards and games based on age? And that kind of leads me to my next question too. But curious, um, now that your kids are a little older, maybe you can provide some inspiration for now their kids.
Well, like I said, when it comes to especially things that are unpreferred activities, so chores and homework are kind of two that I feel like, and even sometimes mealtime. I have a whole chapter on picky
Mm,
eating and how to make mealtime more fun and engaging, because a lot of times that's really difficult too, of getting them to try, new foods, or just getting them to eat or sit still and while they eat and things like that. So again, research shows on a positive behavior support program that, when you do intrinsic rewards, or when you do whether it's raffle tickets or points or sticker charts or things like that, that they do work, especially, for most ages, they work, and they do phase out of it. They don't rely on all the time, and nor that they get a reward every single time. Sometimes it's just a hug and a high five saying, I'm so proud of you for being responsible and helping your family today, doing this or that, whatever it is, or getting your homework done. And, it's just that positivity and that connection and that external validation. But I would say that, rewards and things like that don't need to cost money. It can be extra time. If they do like, tech time, it could be extra time on the screen time, or extra time to stay up before bedtime, or things like that. It doesn't have to be a prize of sorts, whether it's food related or toy related or anything like that. So there's lots of options there. And, just again, gamifying things, for chores specifically. One of my favorite ones is, um, you know, getting like a bunch of cups and some ping pong balls and like having each chore in a cup, and then they throw the ball into cup and then they see what chore they're going to have that week. And so it's kind of like an element of surprise. It's a game, and then they're kind of invested and they don't do the same chore every single week. I have one of those like spinner wheels that I got really cheap. I think it was like $20 on Amazon. But different chores are on the wheel, and then you spin it, and then they see, then they land on whatever chore they're going to land on for the week. And sometimes there's a free space where they don't have any chores for the week, right? And then someone might have double chores, and so they make up for it. And so, but every week's different. There's an element of surprise, spontaneity, playfulness, things like that, to get them invested in doing things like chores. Yes, we want to get to the goal of the intrinsic motivation of them doing it because it feels good, doing it because there is no reward, except it's just, because the house is clean, they're being responsible, things like that. But when they're little, they do respond to that well, and it still teaches them how to do it, but in a playful way. So they're more engaged. And we can also talk about that later when it comes to cooking and mealtime and things like that. But both work. But when they're younger, that type of system works a little bit better. The intrinsic motivation development comes later on, when they're much older.
Absolutely. I cannot believe how quickly 30 minutes have gone by already. We are almost at the 30-minute mark, which is why I could talk to you both for hours. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but we've talked about boredom, we've talked about independent play, rewards, basically all of the things that happen before 11 a.m. in most households. But I I want to kind of close this with maybe something that many parents worry about, I think, is like obviously creating a memorable summer. And when we look back at our own childhoods, what we remember isn't usually, well, at least I'll speak for myself, a perfectly planned schedule, right? And so, I'd love for you not to tell us about, when you think about hearth families and your own family, what do you think kids remember most about summer?
Yeah. I think that kids are never going to remember that perfectly planned schedule. Like as a type A mom that, now I'm like my type B tendencies, I'm like really thankful for. I think what kids remember the most are like the tiny rituals. Like what is that like little check-in in the morning or the morning walk or we make pancakes every Saturday now. Like I always think about, my husband says this thing where when she wakes up, she's like, crazy hair, crazy dreams, because she has like all this crazy hair. And I'm like, wow, you do that because your mom did that for you. And like those are the things that we remember. So it's all the things that feel unscripted.
Mhm.
So I just think about that, not perfectly planned, not perfectly structured, but tiny little rituals that just become like long-term memories.
Amazing. And Dr. Kim, when we first met and talked, you mentioned wellness wings to me, and I definitely want this group to be able to like take that away because it really resonated with me and stuck with me. But if every family listening could implement one daily kind of regulation habit this summer, which I know you also talked a little bit about, what would it be?
Yeah, so wellness wings, that's my favorite to share with parents, because I think a lot of times we're doing so much for everybody else that we forget to sometimes take care of ourselves. And I think if we're not regulated, our kids aren't going to be regulated, and everything just kind of tumbles at like a domino effect from there. So I would say, you can do it in the display. That's where I would do it. But you can also do it, on your phone if you're on the go and you're not home and you're on vacation or whatever the case may be. But you do wellness wings. And so 2 times a day, I would say around 10 or 11 in the morning, kind of mid morning, and then around witching hour, which would be around 4 or 5 p.m., set a reminder for yourself to check in with yourself. It just takes about 2 minutes. Have I had any water lately? Have I eaten anything lately? When's the last time I've gone to the bathroom? When's the last time I've taken a couple deep breaths and just paused for a moment to see like what I do need? Things like that. And so again, just like a quick check-in, a couple quick questions. You can keep it in your notes app, keep it on the display, where you just check in with yourself those 2 times, and then, fill your cup, get what you need to get done. And then, it kind of rejuvenates you for the rest of the day. It might just mean going outside for a few minutes and getting a couple deep breaths in the fresh air and a couple like stretches with your arms over your head. just to get a change of environment. I call it a witching hour walk. So a lot of times, if we can, and you are home, again, some of those rituals that we were talking about can just be certain things you schedule throughout the day in your display of, okay, keeping things somewhat scheduled if you are home of, okay, now what's going to be like quiet time, reading time. It gives everyone a break, right? We haven't do anything. Everyone's just in their room reading, relaxing, taking a nap, whatever the case is. But scheduling things like that in your day, because if you don't schedule them, they're probably not going to happen. So those are all the wellness winks to keep your mental health and your wellness on track for you and your kids. And again, as we talked about, you're role modeling for them and they're learning from you. And if you learn how to take care of yourself and you show them that you're taking care of yourself, that's a skill they're going to learn. And one of the most important skills they're going to learn as they get older. So then they'll learn how to self-care as well.
Absolutely. That reminds me, one time I had blocked out time. It was a pretty challenging time for me personally, but I blocked out time that said, be a sad girl. And my daughter was like, what's that about? And it opened up this whole conversation. Like sometimes you have to even set time to cry it out, let
Yeah.
all the feelings out. And so yeah, that's
Yeah,
my
I do
time.
that with tantrums. I'm like, you know what? You want to have a tantrum? Great. Here's 5 minutes on the calendar.
Yeah.
Timer off, timer it off. They can yell, scream, kick, get it all out of their system. And then you move on. You go have a snack or go play a board game or whatever it is. So many things can be scheduled. I think emotions, tantrums, all those things can be scheduled. And, when they're in the moment, it's a coping skill in the moment, obviously. But, when you need those times, do it because we all
It's
need those
great.
releases.
Yeah, I love that. Well, if there's one thing I'm taking away from today's conversation, it's that a successful summer isn't about keeping our kids like entertained every minute. Everyone, please let us know what your final learning from the conversation is in the comments. And yeah, I know we had so many great questions come into, and I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to get to those. I feel like we need a part two eventually. But please, we follow us on social. I'm sure we'll address most of them there. I also want to thank Bianca so much for keeping track and announcing our winner. Before we wrap up, I also just want to say a huge thank you to Dr. Kim for joining us today and taking time out of her day, and obviously Nat, you as well, sharing all of that wisdom. Um, if today's conversation resonated with you, I highly recommend checking out Dr. Kim's book, Parenting Through Play.
Great.
Um, and of course, thank you all for joining today and being part of this with us. We know how valuable your time is. Yeah, and then I guess last thing, expect a follow-up email from us. If you did not win the giveaway, a special Hearth discount code and Dr. Kim's free 30 days of play guide will be
Great.
shared with you all. So keep an eye on your inbox later
And
today.
also, oh, Kayla, did you want to mention about if anyone buys the book today, their special gift, if you will?
Yeah. Yes.
Or is that coming in the email later?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Do you mind
oh,
sharing with them?
I
Yeah.
just, I just want to let everyone know I just put the link to the book in the chat. It just says Dr. Kim's book, and there's a link there. If you have a different retailer, you can go to my website, and there's lots of them there. You can buy pretty much wherever books are sold. But I did put the link in the chat. Kayla will put it also in the follow-up email that if anyone purchases the book today, just like I said, this is it right here. If you purchase the book today, then I'm going to just do the first. How many people are on here? There's probably a lot, right? I can't see how many people are actually on here right now, but I'll just say the first 25 people will get a free one-on-one consultation with me. And also the first 10 people will get a free coffee on me because we all need caffeine and some energy to get through our day. So the first 10 people that buy it will get the free coffee. The first 25 will get a one-on-one private 30-minute consultation with me. And then for anyone else that still buys it after, we'll get another special treat. I'm not sure what the easiest way is to do that. In the past, I've had it where if you email me or DM me your receipt from just saying, the order was placed, then that's how I've been doing it. So if you want to do it that way, Caleb, you have a better idea. That's how I've been doing it in the past, but whatever
Right.
works you think for this audience is fine with me.
That's perfect. Yeah. Um, Amazing. Thank you so, so much. And I absolutely love this conversation. I hope we can do it again. And yeah, I hope everyone has an amazing
Amazing.
summer. We'll see you all soon.
Great.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.